3 years, as a company that has been, started virtually intentionally. And we're going to share some of the mistakes we've made. We're going to share some of the things that I think we've done well, and I guess some of the things that we do mediocrely. I think that's a word. And just kind of walk through, what churches can learn in this new environment, right? And about what it means to lead. So we're not necessarily going to spend our time today talking about how to live stream a service. We're not going to talk about how to do, small groups or youth ministry at a time when we can't necessarily be together in groups of more than 2 or 3 or 10. But what we are going to talk about is how do we lead teams when we're in a situation where we can't necessarily be together all the time. And so when chemistry launched, Todd and I, we decided early on that this was going to be a virtual company, because we felt like that was going to best allow us to be able to serve the churches that we wanted to work with. We also thought that it was going to allow us to bring together just an incredibly diverse team and talent pool from all across the country, people that we couldn't necessarily relocate into different places. And so when Todd and I started working together virtually, it was about 10 years ago. He was in Bryan, Ohio. He's still in Bryan, Ohio. And in that time, I think I've lived in at least 100 states in different places. So, I mean, we've been coast to coast. We were in New York and California and Texas and Orlando now and all over. Anyhow, so joining me today is Todd Rhoades. Todd is my co-founder. Say hi, Todd.
Hi, Todd.
Yeah, and he is the chief comedian of the team. Also joining us is one of the very first people that joined the chemistry team, and his name is David Treloar. So David is one of our candidate coaches. He spends a lot of time interviewing people for positions that we're looking to help churches find the right candidate for. He does a lot of coaching with guys and just helping them kind of process the season of transition that they're in. And he is also a church planner. And so he is the lead pastor and I would say the chief instigator at Thrive Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So David, say hi.
What's up?
What's up? Chief instigator. And then last but definitely not least is Kelly Norris. So Kelly is one of our church coaches. She partners with churches, helping them find the right fit for the positions that they're looking to hire for. She also will kind of coach them through challenges that they're facing, whether it's staffing related or not. And but she's also, kind of the Swiss Army knife of chemistry staffing. So she does a lot of behind the scenes stuff and really helps us to be able to make this beast go. And so we're grateful for her. She is got an incredibly diverse background. So she's been an executive pastor, she's been a kids pastor, and she's done worship ministry and has led a virtual organization for many, many years. And so her talent has really helped to build this thing. So Kelly, I'm going to stop gushing and let you say hi as well.
Hello, everyone.
So now that I've introduced these guys, let's get rolling. Okay. I won't do the thing where I talk about how over the last 2 weeks, everything's changed ministry wise. You guys get that. I don't need to convince you of that. But what I will say is, and I think we all realize this, that seminary never taught us how to lead a remote team. Seminary has never taught us how to work with our teams when they're distributed all over the city and can't necessarily come into one place at one time. And so what we are convinced of as an organization, and me personally, is that we don't necessarily know what all the ramifications of the coronavirus are going to be for our country or for the church. But I am convinced, and I think we're all convinced, that there are going to be ramifications, and I think they're going to be pretty significant. Now, I'm not talking about infection counts or anything like that, but I think that there's going to be some changes to how we do ministry coming out of this. I think there may be I think churches are going to relook at how they staff, who they hire, skill sets that they're looking for. I think they're going to relook at, what we do as far as facilities and all that kind of stuff. And so what we're going to be doing over the course of the next several Thursdays is we're just going to host a conversation with different ministry leaders. And so today we're talking about what it looks like to start leading virtually. Next week, We're going to have, we're going to be joined by Dave Travis from Generis. We're going to be joined by Jenny Catron from the Foresight Group. We're going to be joined by Nikki Lerner, who's a culture coach, and talk a little bit about best practices that churches are employing in this new environment. And so if you're interested in being a part of that, it's chemistrystaffing.com/virtual. You can sign up. If you're signed up for today, you can go ahead and we'll ping you about that as well, and you'll automatically be invited to that. And so we'll do a series of these over the next several weeks, just to kind of help share what everybody's learning and kind of be able to make this pivot in this time. So we've talked about things are changing. We're talked about what we're doing a little bit. Can we take a minute and just kind of take a deep breath, exhale? Yeah, David's doing it. He's good. And then let's realize that God, this is not a surprise to God. God is in control, and he's going to help us get through this. And so we'll set the anxiety aside, and we'll start talking a little bit about what remote culture looks like. And just so y'all know, I use remote and virtual interchangeably. So please just kind of keep that in mind. But I mentioned when we started chemistry, we did this intentionally to be a virtual company. And what I think we've come to the realization of early on is that virtual is different. Okay. Virtual is going to be way different than working with everybody in the same company or in the same room, in the same building. And it really needs to be. Okay. If we go into this experience expecting that it's going to be just like working out of a traditional office, you will be frustrated. You will be irritated and annoyed. And that's just the reality of the situation. So your way of operating is going to need to change, and you're going to need to rethink a lot of what you're doing. And that's okay. I know churches don't typically do change very easily, but it's okay. And this is going to make us better in the long run. I'm convinced of that. Second thing you need to know is that there's no one size fits all answer to how this works. We're going to share some of what has worked for us, being a team that works with churches and is made up entirely of ministry-minded people. And some of this will work for you, some of it may not. But one of the distinct advantages that we found of working with a remote team is the ability to function asynchronously. That's a big word for meaning that not everybody's going to be in the seat at the same time as you are. And that may be a frustration for some people, but I think that's actually a real benefit, because I think what it allows us to do is set up rhythms where people are able to work when they're most productive. And so what you'll find is that you may have somebody, during the 9 to 10 a.m. slot that you typically use for a staff meeting that is now wrangling kids that are home from school, or fighting over bandwidth with their spouse that's now a new coworker, or just kind of dealing with the anxiety of things. And that's okay. That could be a frustration. But what you'll find is that they're going to carve out spots where they're actually fresher and more focused to be able to do way more productive deep work. And if we can deal with the frustration of not knowing what people are doing at all hours of the day, and embrace the strength that comes from some of the rhythms, that's going to be huge. Last thing that you need to know, and this is going to be the Matt being a ray of sunshine moment for the day. This shift is going to expose and it's going to magnify the cracks and the dysfunction in your current staff culture. I'm going to let that sink in a minute. I'm sorry. That's going to expose the cracks and magnify the cracks and dysfunction in your current culture. If you are not a high trust culture right now, this is going to be incredibly hard. If you are a micromanager, this is going to drive you up the wall. If your culture is not one of development and delegation, this season may well kill you. I'm sorry.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, I try. I hope everybody feels encouraged and loved right now. But awesome. I think I want to be truthful in this. And so we'll talk for the next 30 minutes just a little bit about some of our biggest learnings. And we're going to divide it up into 4 different areas, and these are kind of unnatural. They'll all overlap, but we'll talk a little bit about ministry leadership. We'll talk a little bit about relationships and relationship building in this season. We'll talk a little bit about work-life integration. And then I know we've already got a ton of questions about this, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the technology stack that we use and how we use technology to leverage our relationships. So if that makes sense, did I cover everything I needed to cover kind of going through that, y'all? Or is there anything that you guys need to add?
I think so. Let's do it.
Good. That was a really sly way of getting a minute to take a drink of water. So let's start off talking a little bit about ministry leadership in a remote environment. Okay. So the idea here is that this is going to be a conversation, and if this stays true to form, everybody is going to be unmuted and they're going to start cutting me off any minute now. So a couple of things I just kind of want to cover to get started. First and foremost, what everybody needs to realize, after we take that deep breath, is that the game has changed. Okay, the game has changed, but the mission has not. And so we are still the church, and we are still called to bring the hope and the love and of Christ to the world around us and to our neighbors and to our friends and to our congregations. And we need to keep that in mind. And so even though the rules have changed a little bit and we need to be adaptable and flexible, we need to keep focused on the mission. Okay. So, and with that in mind, I think we also need to realize that this is going to be a season where we go back to basics a lot, and we get back to being, pastors and leaders and really kind of doing the foundational things. And speaking of foundational things when it comes to being pastors and ministry leaders, I'm a seminary grad, so I've brought six C's to talk about over the course of our time together. And so let's dig into those a little bit. So 6 C's, I'm going to divide it up into two blocks. Okay. The first 3 C's is communicate. And that may be cheating a little bit, but I think what we're going to need to remember in this season is that we're going to need to communicate more than we ever have before, that we're going to need to communicate way more intentionally than we ever had before. And I think we're also going to need to communicate way more wisely than we ever had before. And so I think what I mean by that is we need to be really intentional when we're locked away in our home office to make sure that we are reaching out and we're touching base with each of our team members at regular intervals. Okay. I don't know about you guys. But what I have found is it's really easy for me to say, oh, I should talk to David. David is one of the guys that's kind of on the pointy end of the spear for us, because he's talking with more of our candidates and kind of coaching them through season, and isn't necessarily as involved in the day-to-day operation of the business. And so I'll spend a lot of time talking to Todd and Kelly throughout the course of the week, and I will remember from time to time, oh yeah, I should check in with David. But then, that kind of becomes 3 days, becomes, a week, becomes, 6 weeks. And it's like all of a sudden Kevin is saying, or David's saying, I don't know if I even work here anymore. And so one of the things that we need to be really intentional about is just kind of, whether it's putting it on our calendar or setting a rotation where I need to check in with each of these people on a regular basis, and getting people to hold you accountable in that. You got to do it more than you ever had before. As far as intentionality about communication, I think each of us needs to be really clear on where and how we communicate. Todd's going to spend some time talking about how we use our technology to be able to pull this off. We're pretty big fans, most of us at least, of Basecamp. And the ones that aren't, they just kind of grit their teeth and use it because we have to, looking at somebody on our team. But Basecamp helps us to be able to have a few different mediums of communication. One is like the urgent, got to happen, got to have a conversation now. One is more long form written type of communication, just kind of informational things. We have a mode to be able to hash things out and debate through things. And then we have what we call kind of a central source of truth, and just a place where we put all the facts or all the systems and procedures, the policies, that kind of thing, that guide how we do what we do and that kind of thing. And so each of those modes, we need to kind of figure out how we use them, where we push them, and then the way that we use those. One thing, okay, leaders, it is going to be really, really challenging for us to resist the urge of doing everything as a right now urgent message. Okay, we use something called a ping in Basecamp, where it allows us to send a quick message to somebody on our team, and it's like a text message or an email. And we need to know as leaders, if I send something to Kelly or David, they will ideally, they're going to drop everything to be able to focus on that. And if I'm doing that 7, 8, 10, 12 times a day, they're not able to focus on the things that they need to focus on. And so we need to have the discipline to realize that some things I'm going to need to wait on, and that's okay. So last thing, as far as the communication piece, we need to be wise in how we communicate. And just know this: we're going to be doing a lot of communicating through written word, and email, text message, does not do a good job of communicating context, does not do a good job of communicating emotion. And so you as a leader, this is not on the people that you're leading. You as a leader are responsible for making sure it's communicated the way it's meant. And so one of the disciplines that I've gotten into personally is when I send out an email that could potentially be, could be a hard email, is I will stop before I send it. I will grit my teeth and I will read it in mean voice. And I know people are rolling their eyes right now, but I will literally grit my teeth and I will read it like, first and foremost, the game has, and I know that's goofy, but what it does is it construes it in the most awful way possible. And my job is to back down from that and make sure that when I read it that way, that it's impossible for somebody to feel like that their job's in jeopardy, that the sky is falling, that I hate their guts, and have a voodoo doll with them that I use it's our job to make sure that we do that. And so you need to be wise in your word choice. You need to be wise in the mediums that you use to communicate. And you need to know that there's going to be times when you just have to have that phone call or video call. Guys, that's kind of that's my thinking on communication up front. Did I miss anything? Is there anything that you guys might add?
Yeah, the only thing I would say, Matt, is I remember very early on when we were trying to sort so many things out at Chemistry Staffing. There was an interview that I had done. I don't even remember the context to it, but frankly, I missed something. And you had sent me a note, and we ended up talking on the phone. And I remember just saying something to the effect of, "Man, I'm sorry about that miss." And the thing that you backtracked on was, "Hey, don't take that one personally." I don't remember the words that you used, but you were able to detect that I had taken something some way that you didn't intend it, and you immediately followed up on it. And I think the lesson there is that you have to be sensitive to each individual person, because some people will take things more personally than others, especially when it comes to job performance, right? Because we all want to make sure we do a good job. And so from a conversational standpoint, that was something that we could only do via phone call. Yeah. And first of all, it put me at ease. I was like, okay, it's okay to make mistakes. There's very few things that we can do as frontline employees that will actually sink the company. But at the same time, we need to know those things. And so it's trying to put that conversation in a relational context. You and I have known each other, 10 years or something like that. Yeah. And so that would be the one place where I would say phone calls are really important as a follow-up in that case. You can't do that all the time, but in that particular case, in the early days of a virtual company, that made all the difference in the world. Yeah. So.
And I think too, making sure that you're giving the people the benefit of the doubt, right? That's the tone, and that's the idea behind any of the communications, whether on phone or pinging or text or whatever, making sure that the heart behind it, you're giving them the benefit of the doubt.
And I would just say, we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we get down to technology areas, but I think the default during this time for a lot of churches and church leaders that haven't thought this through or haven't had the time to, or or don't have a plan for how they're going to do more with their staff as staff are scattered, is to default to email. And I think that's a huge mistake. If you take everything that you're trying to do in the office and do it via email, we're dealing with some really tough times. We're dealing with people having all of their kids in the house and multitasking. If it hasn't happened already, there are going to be nerves that are going to be a little shorter than normal. And when you are living in that kind of situation and you're only replying to people via email, people are not going to be able to hear your tone. They're not going to be able to hear your heart, or maybe they will, actually. That might be the problem. So we're going to talk a little bit later about that. But if you're only defaulting to email during this time, it will bite you eventually if it hasn't already.
That's good. That's good. Email's horrible, isn't it? Can I say
It
that?
is, and that's one of the things. We'll talk about it later. Don't want to give my talk now, but that's one of the things that we've tried to do at Chemistry, being a virtual conversation. Is we've tried to take as much out of our email inboxes and put it into these other platforms that are more collaborative, and use video and like Matt said, some instant messaging and those kind of things. Try and get as much out of the email inbox as we can, because you can really miscommunicate very easily in email, either intentionally or a lot of times unintentionally.
Yeah. And I have a habit, and one of the things that I say a lot is, I'm sorry to be the guy that responds to a text message or an email or, whatever with a phone call. But I think that's one of those things, especially now. I think we need to be willing to do those conversations that way. And we need to be, willing to kind of switch it out just to make sure that our messages aren't construed wrong. So,
well, Matt and I just did this morning. We were going back and forth, not in an email, but in a ping. And we thought that we were on the same page. And I got about 15 minutes after, and the light went off in my head. It's like, no, I've totally misread that, totally wrong. So we hopped on a really quick video call, just like what we're on right now. And within 2 minutes, we had everything all figured out and we were on the same page. But if we tried to do that through email, that would have been frustrating. And it would have taken all morning.
Yeah, we would have quit. We wouldn't be doing this now. We'd just say,
I'd be sleeping right now. I'd be taking a nap.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. 3 other C's, and then I'll stop talking for a little while. And everybody says amen. Okay. Three other C's: clarity, consistency, commitment. Okay. If you're going to lead well through this, we need to be champions of clarity. We need to be really consistent in how we lead, how we operate, and we need to be I forgot my third C. We're so professional, and we need to be committed to making this work. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this. Clarity. So virtual teams, there is a tendency for this to kind of feel like the old game of telephone, where we say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And then all of a sudden, it gets passed along. And next thing you know, instead of like, trying to help somebody find a youth pastor in California, we're all going for ice cream in Alabama, right? Which is, totally different. And how do we get to that point? But it's very easy for that to happen. And so the onus is on us as leaders to make sure that not only are we communicating, frequently and over communicating things, but also to be utterly clear on what that looks like. It's going to be very difficult because a lot of times, we don't like to change our communication methods. We want our teams to just understand what we're saying and read our minds and that kind of thing. One of the things that I push a lot of our teams, what we've done with a lot of our teams is just say, hey, look, push back on me. I need to get into a regular rhythm of saying what's unclear. That's been a word that I have really had to put into my vocabulary since doing this. What can I clarify? What doesn't make sense? Kelly and I will talk once a week minimum, and I'll just say, okay, so what's in my head that I need to get out, or some variation of that. And she's really good about helping me extract that stuff. But you are going to need to be really committed to making sure that you over clarify things. Otherwise things get confused. Consistency. Let's talk a little bit about consistency. And I look at consistency as being two different ways. One is a rhythm issue, and then one is an accountability issue. So on rhythm, you're going to need to figure out your rhythm in this new reality. Okay. My natural wiring as an ENFP or 7-wing 8 for my Enneagram peeps is to be scattered and all over the place and just like a chipmunk on speed going to the next cool thing. And if I do that in this environment, I will burn the thing down and Todd will hate my guts because I will come back with the next big idea, the next cool thing, and we will be all over the place. And so getting into a rhythm, using my calendar, making sure that I'm intentional about doing things that are important, maybe not urgent, but important first that's going to be a huge win for you as you lead this way. Kelly is going to spend a good bit of time talking through this next. Or shortly, and she's got a ton of ways to be able to make that happen. Accountability. You as the leader, you got to do the work up front. Okay. You need to lean in. You need to do the hard work and make sure that you're leading by example in this. That means that the new processes and new technologies that we adopt, you need to lead the way on, even if you don't like, the design or the layout, or if it's new to you. You need to understand that you need to lead the way and make sure people are going to do this. This also means that the way that you do meetings is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be way different actually. So the old traditional ministry staff team meeting, where the senior pastor sits at the front of the table, or the executive pastor sits at the front of the table and goes around and everybody says, hey, this is what I'm working on this week. And this is what I'm working on this week. Those meetings that not everybody really enjoys. If you do it that way with the plan that you're going to riff off of it, it's not going to work. And so part of what we have learned as an organization that works virtual with churches is that the reason it works is because we all put a lot of work in before we do any team meetings. So as we on church, we ask them a ton of questions through online forums about theology and culture and the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's going on there. And they wrestle through it, debate it. We wrestle through it, debate it, and then we all come together and we drill in on the important things. And so those staff meetings will probably be replaced with a write-up of what's going on in my week, and then kind of wrestling through that ahead of time and coming in prepared. So put the work in, put the work in up front. And then the last thing is this, it's commitment. Okay. Commitment's important to this. If we go into this saying this is just until everything gets back to normal, then this isn't going to work. You need to say, this is going to be our new reality for as long as it lasts, and really lean into being a remote organization. And so that means communicating with clarity. That means, giving people the resources they need to be able to pull it off. It means setting productive rhythms for your team and then kind of going into there. So I've said a whole awful lot. I think I'm finally done talking because I think I've just monopolized way too much time. Did I miss, is there anything that you guys wanted to cut me off on, but didn't?
Well, my favorite saying is to be unclear is to be unkind. And I think that we all need to be practicing kindness in this season.
Cool.
Be clear. Yep.
Okay. Yep. Absolutely.
David, you've been doing this in a church context for approximately forever. You want to kind of talk a little bit about how to relate to your team and care for your team in this?
Yeah, I do. And by the way, there was a comment about if you're a single staff member, you don't necessarily have a team. Here's the thing. We're using the term staff and leaders and volunteers kind of interchangeably here, depending on your context, because let's say you've got 3 or 4 volunteers that you rely on quite a bit. You're still going to apply these same ideas to those volunteers. It just looks a little bit different. So I wanted to address that. But let me just piggyback quickly on something Matt said. The crisis rarely causes a problem. It may cause 1 or 2, but it will always reveal and magnify the problems that exist on your team. every single time because it applies some pressure. And so most of the relationship issues, because we're talking about relationship and relating to team, is a result of your organization's culture. And if you're the senior leader, guess whose responsibility that is? We had heard a story recently about a team that was really struggling with how to respond to this new reality of virtual, and senior pastor skipped the staff meeting. And I'm going to be more blunt than Matt, which is really unusual. And I'm just going to say up front, then that senior pastor needs to find a different job in this environment. That's just not acceptable. You can't do that. And so the second point that I really want to make here, and I think this is important, is that extraordinary circumstances like a killer flu-like disease means that you must behave differently. You have to. There's no question about it. What you have been doing needs to translate somehow. And so you're going to have to behave differently. And so kind of what I want you to think about up front is, how are you going to connect with your team? There's been a lot of questions about that. And you have to think in terms of channels. So there's multiple channels that you can use. FaceTime and Zoom. Great things to get face-to-face. As soon as I'm done with this, I have a meeting with one of my staff members, and we will do Zoom because we can't be in the same room with one another, or it's not, wise for us to do that. So we'll use Zoom, or we'll use FaceTime or something like that to get that face-to-face kind of conversation. It's not the same, but it's better than nothing. And if you have some staff members or some volunteers who maybe a little older demographic who aren't necessarily technology savvy, they can figure out FaceTime. It's not that hard to do, or one of the other apps. And besides, if they have grandkids, they already know how to use it. So, kind of lean into that. Text messaging is a great channel. Yes, you're going to run the risk of being misunderstood, but it's worth the risk. So one of the things that we've done is we've created a text group for all of our staff members, and periodically I just send out stuff. Like yesterday, I think I was jamming to some song, and I thought, you know what, my staff needs this, and so I sent it out to them with a quick note like, you need this right now, and just to try to be a little more inspirational isn't the right word, but encouraging, I think. And please don't forget phone calls. In the days, we're getting thumb cramps because we're, constantly on our phones, direct messaging or text messaging. Phone calls are a great way to be able to communicate tone of voice, and that's an important piece of this. And the other thing I would say about the channel, whatever channel you choose to use with your staff, make it regular. Get it on your calendar, at least weekly. I have one person on my team, he's a volunteer, who is a nurse, and he's really busy. I will be lucky to get once a month with him. The point is, I got to get that once a month on the calendar. I think it's a really important piece of the puzzle, is for that regularity. Oh yeah, by the way, when you talk, always lead with, how are you and your family doing? Come on, guys. I mean, this is still ministry. You're ministering to your staff as well. Don't lead with, hey, what are you working on? Don't, either start with, hey, what's God teaching you in this season, or how are you and your family doing? Those are really great questions to at least show that you care about what's happening. The other thing you need to do is determine the elephant in the room. What's the thing that's really causing the problem? Is it anxiety over their job? Is it fear of the actual coronavirus itself? Is it fear for someone they love potentially being exposed to COVID-19? Is it rising tension with spouse and kids all in the same place for extended periods of time? That's a lot of fun, right? Is it the threat of financial collapse, wiping out retirement savings? That's a real thing that's going on. Or is it a combination of all of the above? And the thing of it is, you need to decide what that is from a ministry standpoint, because if your people are worried about that, they're not necessarily going to be focused on their jobs. And so you need to have what we kind of talk about. If I had a Venn diagram, I'd show it to you. But you have clarity and honesty, and you got to be in that space where those two things connect. And I think it's really important to do that. And you know what? It's okay to say, I don't know. That's got me out of a lot of trouble, is that I don't know. If dealing with the job, I don't know where that is right now. Here's some steps that we're going to take, and here's how we're going to deal with it. But I don't know. So try to be clear, but try to be honest about those things. But you need to determine just exactly what it is, just what it is that your people are concerned about. And so I guess I would say kind of finally is you need to work with your team and staff to develop revised goals and expectations. Remember, you have to behave differently because the way you did this in real time is going to look different in virtually. So again, go back to the basics, like Matt said. What's the mission, vision, purpose, however you define that driving force? And what does this ministry area look like in light of a virtual understanding of church? What's the congregation's need from that ministry area, and what 2 or 3 concrete actionable items can that staffer take in the next week? And if you kind of collaborate with your staff members, then you don't have to worry about the micromanaging piece of it. And so you can check in and do some follow-up. And you're going to need some type of tool that'll help you track those conversations, and Todd will talk about that. But you can use Evernote, Asana, you can use bullet journaling. That's a really good one as well. And then when you're done with your check-ins with your team members or your volunteers or whatever, here's a great way to finish that. Just ask them, how can I be praying for you? And then maybe actually pray for them. That would be a really helpful thing to do. I know sometimes that gets lost. As leaders, we lose that, but at the end of the day, this is still about ministry. And so if I had to kind of wrap all of this up, I would say, know yourself, know your team, and here's your gut check. Do you actually care about your team? And if you do, great, extend a ton of grace, because y'all are going to need it. If you don't actually care about your team, you might want to go check in with Jesus about that one. Okay? So
go check in with Jesus about that one. I love it. The thing I really liked about what you said, David, was, and I appreciate the admonition there at the end, was that as leaders, we have to not only lead, but we have to shepherd. And I know those can be the same things, but they can also be different. I love the questions that you had about, how are you doing? What are you dealing with? Because everyone's dealing with something different. I mean, we're talking with a lot of church staff members now. I mean, the elephant in the room for the staff member is, am I going to have a job on the other end of this? Honestly, the question a lot of pastors are dealing with is, how's this going to affect our budget? That's the elephant in the room. Am I going to have to lay off any staff? But even on a more personal note, as you talk and connect with your staff, and you just have to do this during this time, is, so what are you dealing with? What are your big concerns? How are you dealing with the kids being in the house? How are you connecting with your volunteers? All those kind of things are not only ministry care, but soul care. That's just vitally important that we as leaders do during this time. And if we don't, there's gonna be some initial holes and some cracks that start to show. But over time, those cracks are going to turn into a little bit of anger and distance, and maybe some resentment. So this is a great time to, even though your staff might be scattered, to make sure that you utilize this technology however you can, not only be able to connect, but also to be able to shepherd your staff as you lead.
And we don't do ministry in a vacuum, right? I mean, all of the things that happen at home bleed over, right?
Absolutely.
There attention from those things and affects performance. And if we're not interested in those other things, then we're not actually interested in performance.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
That's cool. So let's talk a little bit about some of the disciplines and the rhythms, if that's okay, what it takes to actually make this work. So Kelly, probably of all of us, is probably the most disciplined in rhythm of any of us.
By far.
But what's that?
By far.
By far. So Kelly, would you mind just kind of sharing what it's like to do this, how you found this, what makes this work and what makes this not work, and what does work-life integration really look like?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for a very long time. I raised all 3 kids with a full-time job while I worked at home. So helped church plants and stuff like that. So I realized that there's this tension that you want all these boundaries and You think there's a work mode and a family mode. Well, when you're working from home, you have to change your thinking from it being two separate things to this work-life integration. And so how do you do that? And I think it's a challenge because we've so often in our past, we've separated those two. We've had such a clear boundary. So I'm just going to talk about some practicalities today of working from home and managing all of this. We're shifting our mindset a bit. The first thing I want to address is set yourself up for success. Create some natural boundaries that are new and different from what you're used to. When you're going into the office, you don't have to remind yourself to get dressed. But when you're at home, you're out of rhythm. You're out of the sync of everything, and so you need to make sure that you keep some of the rhythm. Get up, get dressed, put pants on, even if you're on video calls, and wear them. I've even heard that putting on shoes helps you be more productive. There's something in your mind that shifts to, so probably 3 of the 4 of us are wearing shoes right now. I'm not going to say who.
You switched from pants to shoes really quick there, Kelly.
I know. But putting shoes on kind of tells your brain, hey, I'm doing something, I'm at work. So I guess Mr. Rogers had it good there, right? He knew to go from his work mode to his comfy shoes. He made the switch. So make the switch, be like Mr. Rogers. Set a schedule, have a clear start and stop time for your day. Part of this is even time blocking. Holding yourself accountable for portions of your day that you're going to spend on, team building and even family. Taking breaks throughout the day so that you can connect with your family because they are your new coworkers. So having that understanding and that new rhythm is super important. When you're focused on working, you may have to turn off your phone notifications. Set your boundaries and make them clear. Tell your staff, even to David's point, you're connecting with them all the time, but make sure they know when you're available and when you're not available. And I think that's important to clarify that. You're also clarifying things to your family and your kids. Hey, these are my work hours here. I'm going to, you can hold me accountable to start and stop. So I also want to encourage you to prioritize throughout your day. So within your time blocks, make sure you're clearly identifying your priorities within those time blocks. It's going to really help you. I know some people who use a time tracker, not because they work hourly, but because it kind of gives them some accountability of how much time they're spending on a project. And there's a reality check there that they can look back and say, oh, I spent 20 extra minutes on this project and I didn't need to. So that's really important. Something I also want to encourage you to do, and I know I'm rushing through this for time's sake, but make appointments with yourself. Make sure you're caring for yourself in this new rhythm. I mean, that means getting up and moving, going for a walk for a lunch call, or taking a call while you're taking a walk around the block. Try not to eat all your meals in front of your computer, because you're going to get into some bad habits there. Make sure you're intentionally connecting with your family or the other people in your house at that time. And this is kind of a polar opposite to that, but there are times when I found myself really wanting some connection with other people, and I'll invite someone to a video call lunch. We'll do coffee together online. So, there's this balance of not being glued to your computer all day, every day, from morning to night. Like this, all of a sudden you're sitting in a dark room and you realize the sun's gone down and you never turn your light on. That sort of thing. You go from that extreme to, constantly getting distracted. So setting these boundaries and time blocking will help you balance those things out. You may have to experience a little bit. Give yourself some grace there. What worked week 1 may not have worked well. And so you're going to have to learn how to adjust and tweak that. And what you learn, you can teach to your team. So that's really great. Another big piece of this is really about communication. I know Matt touched on communication, quite a bit. But within an integrated environment, you're not only communicating externally, but you're internally communicating to your new coworkers. So right now, I made sure all of my other people in the house were not on our Wi-Fi. They're all using hotspots because I knew that I didn't want interruptions to this call. And my 2 dogs are locked in a room with my daughter. So you do what you have to do.
Oh, praise God for that one.
They're not going to interrupt my little 2 coworkers, but I like to, at the same time, understand that we all have to give each other grace during this time. We're all trying to figure this out. Everybody has been pulled home. And so if a dog is barking, give grace. It's okay. You'll pick up where you left off and move on. If your kid's acting up and interrupts a call, the person on the other line at this point is going to understand that. We're all in this new season together. This is a fearful time for some kids, and so they're not always going to act the way they usually act. So we have to take time for them. Something that I've found in my many years of working from home is being careful with how we communicate things. We're dealing with a lot of sensitive issues at home. I mean, many pastors are bringing home their work and they're communicating and counseling people. Be mindful of where your children are during those seasons. They hear more than you know, and keeping them, it's a challenge to keep them busy while you're making those calls. But be careful with what you say during those times, because they're gonna feed off of that fear if they detect anything from your voice or from your conversation. And quickly, some final thoughts. Soul care is super important. We're gonna have the tendency to be glued to our computers, trying to manage and juggle all the things. So make sure you create some natural pauses throughout your day. Set aside some time to reflect and pray and journal, practice thankfulness, all of those things that take our mind off of the negative and help us remember that God is in control. So before you jump back into work, after your lunch or something like that, make sure you're taking some time to reflect on all the goodness of God. Again, I said, give yourself grace, give your family grace, give your dogs grace, and give your coworkers grace. Be flexible. So soul care, grace, flexibility. Meetings are going to get moved, and kids are going to need some attention. So just be flexible and understand that you need to be flexible for yourself and your family, as well as for your team. And then make sure that you phone a friend. We're talking about work, we're talking about all of these serious team transitions, but you're going to need someone to pour into you. So make sure that you have someone that you can call, someone that you can connect with on a regular basis, who's going to build you up, who's going to encourage you. If you come through a really tough time, make sure there's someone there so you don't feel alone. We're already going to struggle with isolation, but being disconnected is just going to make that all that much worse. So I'm just encouraging you, take care of you during this time. And I love that our common theme here has been just breathe. Just breathe. It's going to be okay.
Two questions, if I can, and I know we're kind of bumping up on time, but number one, this is a great question from David. It's how do you honor Sabbath when you're working in the same place that you live?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have wrestled with Sabbath is something that's personal to you. But what's worked for me in my setting has been a floating Sabbath. So I have a 24-hour time where I put aside work. And so that could be from dinner to dinner the next day. But I think it's important for us to model that for our families and for our congregants. We need to make sure that we keep that, we're communicating with our team, hey, my Sabbath is this time. So, and we maybe keep a Sabbath calendar, so that we can honor each other's Sabbaths. especially when we're doing online church stuff, that can be very flexible, but making sure you have that time is important. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
That's really good. One other thing, somebody asked, what's one of the what are some of the positives about working virtually as someone who's done this for quite some time? We talk a lot about, this is a struggle, this is a change.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think once you get into these rhythms, you find a lot of freedom. So you create boundaries, right? Just like with your kids, you create some boundaries, and then they have freedom within that. So for me, it has been, time blocking, making sure I'm getting things done, and then I can walk away from my computer. And I have a very short drive home, down the hall. But it makes it super easy to then disconnect and to focus on the family. I think the hard part about work-life integration is you don't have that time to leave work, drive home, but if you create those boundaries, it gives you a little more separation in your mind. So, I mean, it's been a joy to work from home and to be available to my family. One of the things that my kids say is, Mom, I know you were busy and you're working a lot, but I knew you were always available to me. And that spoke volumes as a mom.
On the flip side of that, though, just kind of full disclosure is that Kelly works as the kind of administrator for my church, and I've gotten to see the opposite side of that, of where she does take those times off and create some of those boundaries, and that makes her a much better employee, or teammate, I would say, is probably a better way of describing it. And the really cool part of it is, from my standpoint, because I tend to be a little more relational, is I've gotten to know her family. We're on a video call and her kids pop in, and I know about what's going on in their lives and that sort of thing. And so from that standpoint, working virtually isn't in some ways, I have more of an insight into what goes on in her life, because we're not separated in an office, just the 2, 3, or 4 of us, but rather, we're actually seeing how her life is playing out. Her dogs are like the world's greatest watchdogs in the world. So anyway, just to kind of say that there, I confess, now I can preach.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say this, and then we're going to let Todd talk about technology unless he wants to say something about good things about this. I would argue that I have better relationships and deeper relationships with our team here, and am way more up to speed on what's going on in their lives than I think even in some of the churches that I've worked with. And that's not a judgment on the churches. I just think it allows, because of the amount of time that we are doing Zoom call. I don't even know what it is, but even the times that we get together in person, they're fun. And it's with people I feel like I've known for years and years and years and years. So I don't know why that is, but it's really kind of cool.
And I do think part of that is the vulnerability of the video call. You're seeing their facial expressions. You're seeing some of doesn't take place of face to face, but it kind of does give you that bridge.
Yeah. So we're going to run over, because I don't think Todd's going to do all of technology in 2 minutes. But we will keep going as long as y'all want to, and we're recording this and we'll share the links on this. But Todd, tell us how to make it work.
So this is where the rubber meets the road, right? Let's talk about some of the more pragmatic things. How do we do this?
No pressure, man. No pressure.
Yeah, I know. Probably the question everybody's asking. So what technology should we use? How do we take the experience that we had in the office 3 weeks ago, when we were all able to communicate face to face, and transfer that to online where we can only communicate online? Well, here's some things to remember. First of all, people get really freaked out about this. You got this. It's just take little bite-sized pieces, and hopefully we'll explain how to do that a little bit. But here's the first thing: is just remember that technology is a tool. That's all. It's nothing more. It's nothing less. It's nothing to be really scared about or freaked out about. It's just a tool. So we're gonna talk about how we can use technology and different platforms in particular to kind of you're not going to be able to replicate, but we want to try and replicate it as much as possible what you had 3 weeks ago in the office to what you can create online, at least during this time, during this crisis. And I think we're going to all learn things during this time about some things that are really cool and some things that work really well that we're going to continue on even a few months down the road or however long this crisis goes. One word of caution, and I mentioned this earlier, don't think that you can make this pivot or make this move via email. Email is very impersonal. It's hard to, almost impossible at times to read an email and get a feel of the sender's emotion or their attitude or their tone or their heart even. And that means that many times email can be misread and misinterpreted. Now you still have to use email, but I'm with David that said earlier, email is not the only form of communication. You can use other forms that we use all the time. You can text, texting is maybe a little better than email because it's short and sweet and you don't kind of divulge everything on a page. Email, phone calls are great, but it's really those connection pieces that are really important. Another really important thing I think it's important for all of us to remember is, and you guys know this isn't rocket surgery here, everyone on your team is going to react differently to the technology changes that need to happen and those technology changes that you're about to make. Okay, so we've all got people on our staff that are kind of tech savvy, and those people are going to be giddy. Those people are going to be saying, man, this is awesome. We should have done this, 6 months ago, moving some of this stuff online. So you're going to have people that are giddy, and then there are going to be others on your team that are just going to kick and scream. And that's okay. That's okay. But you have to make it clear, lovingly and guidingly. You need to lead people through this and make sure that everybody does get on this bus, at least during this time. Opting out of what needs to be done and how you need to gather and how you need to communicate with technology isn't an option. Opting out, not an option here. So, another word for those on your team that are going to be the kickers and the screamers, quick word of advice. You want to love and you want to show grace, but don't accept a lot of excuses. People are going to say, hey, I don't get technology. I'll just use email, or different kind of excuses. Like David said, if they've got grandkids, they've already kind of started to use some of this technology if they're communicating with their grandkids. So it might seem like a bigger hurdle to them. What you need to do is help them through that. Lead by example with the technology that you choose, but hold your team accountable on that as well. Really the goal is, like I said, you're not going to be able to replicate everything that you were able to do 3 weeks ago face-to-face, but actually you can do a lot to actually enhance, as Matt said. I feel the same way with a lot of the members on our team. Some members I haven't even met face-to-face, but I still feel a real connection. So here's the deal. Not everybody, and maybe you're one of these people, and that's fine, but maybe you have kind of a skeptical view of using web video for connection, right? That it's not the same as face-to-face. And you're right, it's not the same as face-to-face, but you can make some real connections. So give it a chance. Get everybody on the same page, using the same technology. One of the questions we got is, how do we keep the unity? Well, this is one of the ways you keep the unity, is by staying connected. And video in particular is a great way to do that. Word of caution, another word of caution, then I'm going to get into actually what technology we use and maybe some ideas of how you can implement this. We've known a pastor or a church leader or two in our careers that tends to be more on the micromanager side of things. Okay. If you were a micromanager 3 weeks ago, you're going to tend to want to be a micromanager with your team virtually. Okay. I would just caution you, don't make this a police state. Right. There are apps. Maybe I shouldn't. Oh, Matt, you going to say something?
One of the worst examples I've seen since this shift happened is a church sent out a breakdown by hour of where people were spending their time. And they were expected, if they were getting paid by the church, they needed to fill that out and submit it every day. And don't be that guy.
I was going to share there. I just saw this yesterday. There are companies, and I would not doubt that there are churches that are going to try and implement that. Please don't. There are apps that you can put on your phone that will take a snapshot through each employee's webcam every 1 to 5 minutes and report that back to see if they're in front of their desk and they're actually working.
No.
There, I could see some of the leaders that I've seen in the past that would actually think this was a good idea. It's not a good idea. Don't make this a police state. Here's the deal. You've got to be able to trust your team to do the work and give them the freedom to do it. If you didn't trust, if you had a hard time trusting your team before, this is going to be really difficult for you. But you've got to allow people to do their job. You've got to hold them accountable to do that and encourage that through the technology. But don't make it a police state. Okay.
If you're wanting that type of micromanagement, either you have a personal issue or you don't trust your staff. And if you don't trust your staff, then you probably need to call chemistry and help us, let us help you find somebody that you can trust, because
David with a sales pitch.
Well, I'm just saying is that you got to call that one out. I'm like, senior leader, come on. I mean, if you don't trust your folks, that's heart check, and that's probably culture check. So
yeah, absolutely. But it's a problem we see a lot of times in some churches. So here's what I would say right before we dig into the actual technology, and we'll give you guys some next steps and move you forward with your day. You've got a lot of things going on. The technology that you use is not as important as the connection that you're going to make and the plan that you come up with. Okay. So there are all different kinds of technologies. But that said, what I'm going to share with you here are a couple of technologies that we use, that we've been using for the past 3 years, that work really, really well for us. And we would encourage you to kind of check them out. I'm going to talk about 2 different kinds of kind of technology platforms. One is online video, and another is online collaboration tools. Okay, so first is online video. We use almost exclusively Zoom, which is, we're doing a Zoom webinar now, but and we'll send not only to, either later today or tomorrow a copy of this video and also all the links of all the technology stack that we're talking about today. It's zoom.us. Zoom allows you to do one-on-one or group meetings online, and there's a free version that's includes, you can use it. Everybody on your staff can have their own account for free, unlimited one-on-one video calls. You can do group meetings with up to 100 people, but those are on the free plan. You're only limited to about 40 minutes. So a pro account on Zoom is like $15 a month, and you get unlimited duration on all of your group calls. So you could do, as much longer than 40 minutes if you wanted to. Also with the pro plan, you can also record your meetings and watch them at a later time, or share them with team members maybe that weren't able to be on the call.
Hey, Todd, one quick thing about Zoom. Somebody just was commenting in the chat about it, and I wanted to make mention of this, that a lot of the universities are now moving to Zoom for online instruction. And so depending on the time of day, you may see some lag. And I know we've seen some kind of in our recording pieces at chemistry, but my guess is that Zoom's probably making a major investment in new servers.
I've noticed just since we started all this about a week and a half ago, everything was really kind of bogged down and laggy. Yesterday, I on just the turnaround of the rendering of the videos was almost instantaneous. I mean, within 3 minutes.
It's a lot quicker than
I think they've added a lot, and we do everything on Zoom. So if Zoom goes down, we're kind of in a world of hurt. But Zoom has done a really good job at keeping up with demand, I think, and for us, they've been a really, really steady platform.
And as I understand it, the underlying architecture is actually Google Hangouts, and I know that I got some type of notice from Google saying that they've just updated something on their server. So just keep that in mind. If you're Zoom and it's feeling a little buggy, it may not be you. It may actually be kind of what's going on traffic-wise.
Yeah. But again, you might be skeptical of online video, but let me encourage you, it works. We encourage our team. We've got 22 people on our team, and we're entirely virtual. Many of our team members have, in fact, never have even met each other face to face. So even though we have not met each other face to face, we know each other, we love each other, we care for each other, we pray for each other daily, and there is a real connection. Okay, so Zoom's flexible, it's easy to use, you can be up and running in a minute, it's easy to bring new people into a meeting. We've actually, with all of our candidate interviews, connected probably 1,000 to 1,500 individuals in individual video calls, and Zoom just works. So the platform really does work. Now there are other options. You can use Skype, you can use FaceTime, you can use Facebook Messenger, and all of those work. But for Zoom, for team calls and individual calls, we'd really encourage you to check Zoom out. The other thing that I would really encourage you to check out would be some kind of online collaboration tool. And actually, I think that this is a tool that you can use even after this crisis is over, even when you're all in the same building again. Online collaboration tools are good. Two that we've used are Slack and Basecamp. Both tools have free and/or paid models. But collaboration tools allow you to have ongoing messages and documents and all those kind of things based around your teams and in different topics or projects. And this is really our online collaboration tool. We started with Slack. Probably about 6 or 8 months ago, we moved to Basecamp because Basecamp had a lot of additional features that we needed with just pings and message boards and document folders and all those kind of things. So it's really helped us to keep everybody's head out of their inbox and to collaborate online. So everybody, if you're working on a project, say you have a children's ministry team or a worship team, or you're working on a membership class, you can put all of those things into a separate project, and all the people that are working on that, and you can collaborate with your documents and your conversations all inside of there. It's really well organized. It works really well during this time, working virtually, but as you get back together as a team in the same building, it's going to continue to work for you. Matter of fact, Basecamp just yesterday posted, it's about an 1.5-hour video that actually walks through the nitty-gritty of how to set that up and how to make that work for your team. So, of course, you can also use other things. You can use group text. You can use a Facebook Messenger group, WhatsApp. Pick a platform and see if it works for you. Don't feel like you've got to stick with one platform. If it doesn't work, you can switch it up pretty easily. So I feel like I went through that really, really fast, but I wanted to close, and then I'll turn it back over to Matt to close us out. But so where do we start? Okay. Here's my recommendation. I would start with a video collaboration tool. And like I said, I would check out Zoom, try it out with your team, schedule a staff meetup online, expect people to be there, have an agenda, keep the meeting light and short. And that's where I would start. Share some faith stories, find out what you're learning, find out what the victories are during this time for you, what's working, find out the failures, what's not working. And you'll be surprised how well this web video really works to help keep your team connected. I'd start from one platform and build from there. I think you could start with the video platform and then get that kind of under control so that you're using that well, and then you could start with more of the collaboration software. Next steps for you. Here's what I would do if I was in your situation and I'm not using any of these tools right now. I would take probably an hour to 2 hours of your time. I go over to zoom.com or zoom.us, pick that video platform or check out other video platforms and choose a platform and schedule your first meeting with your team. All of these platforms have really easy to use tutorials. The usability is very easy on all of these. So I would do that today, pick that out. And then tomorrow, I know a lot of, everything's kind of up in the air. Maybe your day off is normally on Friday, but everything's kind of up in the air. Before the weekend services start, I would schedule that first video call. That would be your assignment from this. Do your first video call, introduce the technology, tell people you're going to connect at this time, make it kind of light, a light connection thing. Here's what's happening this weekend. Here's some things to watch for. Here's what we're doing differently. Catch all the people on your team up on what you're doing. And then I would do that again after the weekend, maybe Monday or Tuesday, have another staff call, debrief the weekend. What did you learn? Give updates. And that's where I would start. So today, pick your video platform, maybe do a meeting before the weekend service, maybe do another online video meeting next week. And we'll share all the links to get you going. And if you have any questions, you can contact us. We'll give you our contact information as well. We're happy to be a resource and help you individually or your church as you kind of move into this new kind of unknown for a lot of us.
And I did want to mention something, Todd, when you make your first video call, it's easy to just say, okay, this is what we're going to use, this is what we're going to stick with. But I think giving the team the heads up that, hey, this is what we're going to try, and we'll ebb and flow. We'll, if it doesn't work, we'll shift to another one. Just to give them the heads up that, hey, we're learning together, and we may have to make that shift. So just communicating that up front, I think, helps them be a little more flexible.
Very good.
Well, hey, we went like 15 minutes over, so thank you guys for hanging out with us. Two things just want to put on your all's radar, and we will hang out for a little bit and answer any questions that people might have if you want to drop them in. We'd love to hang out for another 15 minutes or so if you'd like. Two things though. One, next week we'll have a conversation about what it looks like, what churches are learning, best practices in a real new reality. And so if you are watching this on Facebook Live and haven't signed up, you can go to chemistrystaffing.com/virtual, and you will you'll be put on the list for next week's. Just a reminder. The other thing is this: we want to help churches navigate this. We are not, I wouldn't say that we're the experts and that we know everything, but I think we've got a pretty good head start, and we'd love to kind of walk with you in this season. And so we're going to put together what we call a virtual boot camp. And this is one of those things. And really listen to me. This isn't a sales pitch. This is a payment optional thing. We understand that churches just aren't sure what the finances look like right now. And so if you guys want to pay for it, great. And we appreciate that. But if you can't, that's fine too. We just want to make sure that you guys get this right. And so we're going to put together a handful of cohorts that just walk together and learn how to be a virtual organization. If you're interested in being a part of that, it's chemistrystaffing.com/virtual bootcamp. And go ahead, sign up, and we'll send out details early next week about what that looks like and how you can get involved. We'd love to be able to walk through this season and coach you through this. So thank you all for hanging out.